So, Adam Cox is a London-based hypnotherapist, most well known for being the host of the world's most popular hypnosis podcast, The Hypnotist, with over 2,000 episodes published and downloaded by over 12 million globally. The show features genuine hypnosis sessions for real clients facing genuine issues while protecting client confidentiality. Adam has impacted millions globally and is known for his innovative approaches to nested loops and use of metaphor. Adam is our keynote speaker at the ABH Hypnosis Conference 2025, which is being held on the 12th and 13th of September 2025. Adam's topic is New Age, the new golden age of hypnotherapy. So welcome, Adam, and thank you for being with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Tara. Thank you so much.
All right, so tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to find hypnosis.
I I was a very, very shy, very timid, very nervous boy, and I grew up feeling not very good about myself, kind of inferior. And because of that, it created a desire to improve myself. So I was one of those nerdy kids in the library at kind of 10, 11 years old, reading books on psychology and speed reading and mnemonics and the things that quite cringeworthy to kind of think about now. But it came from a good place, and that was to, if you don't believe you're good enough, to get better. And I thought that learning would be one of those ways. I thought that exercise would be one of those ways, and I did that. And part of what I stumbled across, I think it was a very old book by Ormond McGill when I was about 12 that had certain kind of stage hypnosis techniques. And I remember doing the magnetic fingers with my friends and kind of the arm lock convincers and all of this kind of stuff. And it just planted a seed of fascination at a very young age. What actually was the real catalyst for me to kind of feel like I wanted to become competent in this area was that, ironically, when I left home to study psychology, I had a high level of social anxiety to the extent that I became a recluse for about a year. And most people, I think, when they start dealing with anxiety, they just avoid whatever the thing that causes the anxiety. And my thing was people, so I avoided people, and that made me a recluse. And you can't live like that. And I knew that. And I also knew that I didn't want to see a doctor because they would give me antidepressants and kind of beta blockers and those kind of things. So I didn't want to be medicated. I just wanted to fix it. But luckily, the university I was studying psychology had a 24-hour library, so I could study at night when there was no people there. And I started at the what people would consider the traditional therapeutic approaches like psychoanalysis and then behavioral psychology. And it didn't really help me in the way that I wanted to. And then actually, it was a combination of hypnosis and NLP that actually made a difference. And I went from being this very shy, introverted, nervous child to actually feeling very resourceful, very confident. And then, I think anyone in their early 20s, if they feel that they've got these kind of superpowers, they're not, honestly, they're not interested in helping other people. I wanted to make as much money as I could and be as successful as I could, and that's what I did. But at the age of 35, I stumbled across this approach called Ikigai, this Japanese kind of philosophy of being. And I'd built a PR agency. I'd, become financially successful. I had investments. But three of the Ikigai circles, um, was I good at what I was doing? Yes. Did the world need it? Were they willing to pay me for it? Those were all sorted. But was I passionate about what I was doing and was I fulfilled? Absolutely not. So I asked myself the question, and that was, what am I, what do I like to learn about and read about, even though I'm not getting paid for it and I don't have to do it for work? And it was all hypnosis, NLP, psychology kinds of things. So I thought, oh, that's the thing I'm meant to be doing. And then I literally signed up for a postgraduate course in hypnotherapy the very next day. Um, did pretty good at that, but my background in business then meant that I could build um, quite a thriving practice. I got a clinic in quite a prestigious part of London called Harley Street. It's kind of known for where the rich and famous get their kind of therapy or cosmetic surgery. Because I had a PR agency, I could get
Mm,
lots of high profile media coverage. And because of that agency, I was able to offer free sessions to D-list celebrities in exchange for video testimonials. So I could
mhm,
have the moniker, hypnotherapist to celebrities. And then because of that reputation, a few members of my royal family started working with me. And then it gave me this kind of huge levels of credibility
mm,
just 3 or 4 years into being a hypnotherapist.
mhm,
Um, then COVID came along, and I knew that I wasn't going to see lots of clients, but I
mm,
wanted to have an outlet for my hypnotherapy. So I created a podcast called The Hypnotist.
mm.
And as a result of that podcast, that's how most people know me now, because it's approaching across YouTube and the podcast about 15 million people. So
Yeah.
they hear my hypnosis all the time. And had it not been for COVID, I don't think I would be kind of doing what I'm doing right now. But
Mm.
I think it's kind of it was the right thing at the right time. So yeah, that's a short version of my background.
Yeah, definitely taking advantage and, making the most of all those little opportunities and those times when,
Mm,
there's perhaps change in the environment and change within yourself to make the most of that. So,
yeah.
well done to your success in that regard. So, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about hypnotherapy today?
I think the two biggest misconceptions I think are control. A lot of people that don't understand hypnotherapy, they have either stage hypnosis or movies as a reference point. And
Mm,
a lot of the premise there is that the hypnotist controls the respondent, that they're under the control. And even early Mesmer had that kind of yeah, element of look into my eyes. If you look at the old Scooby-Doo villains, they have the kind of the spirals and that kind of
yeah.
almost kind of Machiavellian archetype of they can control and manipulate. And I think that still exists today. The
Mm,
metaphor I use to counter that with clients is I say, imagine you're lost in a big forest and you don't know that forest at all, and you
mm,
bump into someone that knows that forest incredibly well, and they offer to lead you to safety, does that mean that you're in under the control of that guide, or does
mm,
it just make sense for you to work with that person because they know that terrain very well? And I think
mm,
that's a really helpful way to pace the experience of someone that has that fear that they're going to be controlled. I think the
mm,
second misconception is what trance is or what hypnosis is. And I
mm,
think some people have the idea that they have to have full amnesia, that it is to the audience watching a stage hypnosis show, I click my fingers and then there's a change. And I think there is an expectation of that. And therefore it creates a misconception. And what I tend to do to, again, pre-handle that, because I think, every hypnotherapist early in their career has the experience of at the end of the session, the client says, well, I felt very relaxed, but I don't think I was hypnotized, because their definition of hypnosis is different to what they experienced. And therefore, that's why the pre-talk and the right metaphors are so important. So I say, you go into hypnosis all the time. You read a good book and you don't recall turning the pages, that's hypnosis. You have a long drive and you don't remember, changing lanes or changing gears, that's hypnosis. And once you do that, it makes it feel that what they experience actually is hypnosis. But the
mm,
other thing that I say is that the purpose of the hypnosis is to create the change. A great therapy session is only a great therapy session if you notice changes. So
mm.
there are misconceptions, absolutely, but I think it's the responsibility of a hypnotherapist to, in the pre-talk or the initial consultation call, to manage those, misconceptions or expectations so that it doesn't break rapport actually when they're working with the client.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I know that you love using metaphors and you've used a couple for us there. So in particular, is there, a way that you design your techniques for metaphors to be able to harness that power and use that with clients or
There's two things. One, I look for inspiration everywhere, and I think life gives you all the metaphors that you need,
mm,
and we know that from proverbs and things like that. Society likes metaphors because they can simplify complex, kind of concepts in
Mm.
a phrase, that life is a game. Like, that's a beautiful metaphor, and it takes whole of life and gives it some kind of structure intuitively. So I think life itself is a great inspiration. I love
Mm.
watching movies. I get so much inspiration from movies as to metaphors that can help. But actually, my biggest source of metaphor comes from clients, and I'll ask them, is there a situation or is there? I had a client a week ago that felt that they weren't prepared enough. They wanted to feel more prepared. And
Mhm.
I said, which is a fictional character that you consider very well prepared? And they just said Mary Poppins. I haven't seen the movie Mary Poppins in like 30 years. But I do recall this kind of bag that has unlimited things inside, and that there's a scene they can jump into a picture. So I just use Mary Poppins as a metaphor on the fly because the client could resonate with that. And I think, if you have life and your clients as your main source of inspiration, that's going
Mm.
to work better than a little black book of metaphors that everything turns out to be, oh, you're a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Like, you avoid the cliche metaphors and actually you come up with something that really kind of connects and resonates with the client you're working with.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. There's that saying in NLP too that, their client will give you their own solutions. It's almost like
That's
you
it.
listen to their words, you listen to their interests. And if you can give them a metaphor that is within their interests, then, obviously they're going to engage with that story a lot better. So that's
Yeah,
great.
and I'm an atheist, and I work with a lot of very religious clients, and I think religion is an amazing metaphor. Some
Mm.
of the stories, some of the concepts, very empowering beliefs, very highly resourceful states,
Mm.
connected to things like acceptance and forgiveness, which is very useful. So I think use whatever the client connects with, and that's a shortcut.
Yeah, sure. And you touched on something before when you were talking about, the effectiveness of your hypnotherapy session. So, how do you measure the real impact of a hypnosis session?
I start the session. There's a fantastic book called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R.
Mm.
Covey. And one of those seven habits is simply start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
So even on a consultation call or very first session with a client, I'll say, if our work together is successful, how will you know? It's the NLP elicitation of outcomes. And therefore, a session is successful, or a therapeutic relationship is how close can I get to what they consider a successful outcome. That might be feeling more resourceful. It might be stopping a particular behavior. It might be changes in emotions or whatever it might be. But
Mm.
the client gets to decide if I'm successful or not,
Yeah.
because have I helped? And if I've helped, then it's successful. But there are other metrics as well. And I think word of mouth and referrals is a very good clue that you're doing something right, because
Mm.
who would recommend you to other people if they haven't had a good experience and it hasn't been beneficial? Like, that's counterintuitive. So I
Mm.
think the client lets you know.
Sure. So, for other coaches out there, and you'll be speaking to, a lot of hypnotherapists and coaches at the upcoming conference, but those looking to scale their influence and their presence online, what advice do you have for them?
I think embrace technology. Um, I think I would have two or three times the audience I have if I just started 2 years earlier. Um, so it's daunting, and it feels, oh, I've got so much to learn.
Mm.
But and this is one of the things I'm going to be talking about as part of why now is a new golden age.
Mhm.
Ericsson didn't have access to Zoom, and Braid didn't have access to AI. But imagine if
Mm.
they did. Like,
Mm.
how many more people could they have access to? If Milton Erickson or Elman had a podcast, I would have listened to it.
Yeah.
But their ability to audience took a long time because it required transcripts and books, and then other people like Bandler and Grinder studying them, modeling them, and that took decades for that to kind of get distributed to different audiences. And I think now it's kind of embraced the technology. There are things that we have access to now that are like superpowers if we embrace them. So embrace them. And then I
Mhm.
think because we are entering the world of of kind of AI at an accelerating rate, be
Mm,
more authentic than you have ever been, because we're probably under 2 years away from infinite AI therapy clones, and they can't be you. So you have to be you more than ever before.
mm.
So I say embrace the technology, don't be daunted by it, but really be authentic, because if you're trying to sound like, a very kind of neutral, generic therapist, well, you're the first to be replaced by AI if AI can't replicate you exactly. So that's the thing to do.
Yeah. So you really touched on my next question there, but that is, what do you see hypnotherapy evolving into, in the next decade? How do you kind of see it transforming or evolving?
It's going to be democratized. Like most people um, can't afford to work with me directly.
Hmm.
So, but the digital version of me, they get my podcast or YouTube channel for free. They can do low cost courses. It's still me. It's just a
Yeah.
recorded version of me. So
Mm,
I think one of the key changes is that um, people competent in a particular area become more accessible than ever before.
mm,
The barrier to entry to receiving therapy gets lower and lower, because
mm,
you don't have to rely on health insurance. It becomes so cost effective, anyone can get the kind of help that they're looking for.
mm.
Um, and I see it as a future where AI is not going to replace therapists. AI is going to replace therapists that don't embrace AI. And I would
Yeah.
say the kind of therapists that need to reflect are the people that um, are easily replaced by technology. So if they do exactly the same technique on every single session, irrespective of the session, why
Mm,
wouldn't someone buy just one recording of that and then they've got it forever? Like there's no calibration or personalization. For those therapists too dependent on scripts or specific techniques, I think technology, whether that's therapists using technology or the technology itself, I think that why would you work with a therapist that is reading a script at you if
mm,
you can have AI, you know, making it way more personalized to you, because it will ask you the questions beforehand. So I think it's an exciting time, but it's not without its risks.
mm.
And I think we're living in a time which is, I don't know if you've ever read the book like Who Moved My Cheese, but it's like that, like never before. The metaphor in Who Moved My Cheese is that you've got these humans and mice, and there's a regular source of cheese in the maze, and then one day the cheese is gone. The mice
Mm,
start looking for the new cheese straight away, but the humans are just waiting for that cheese to come back. And I think it's going to be like that. If therapists are just thinking, oh, this AI fad and this thing here won't be around for very long. Like the cheese is in a different place. Like you've got to find that new thing. So I think pivoting, learning, not just how to be a good hypnotherapist, but maybe how to create clients in different ways, or how to, build your brand in a different way. Like it's going to require different skills. And I think those therapists that are eager to learn and embracing the changes, they will thrive in this golden age.
mm.
But like any golden age, if you were a homemade manufacturer of things and the Industrial Revolution came along, and you're like, no, we're gonna craft things, and the factory down the road is doing things at like half the price. Yeah, you could say there's honor in doing it in that way, but you might not exist as a business. And I think, this is like the Industrial Revolution on steroids for all of the knowledge industries, of which therapy is one of them.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's right. It's far wider than hypnotherapy in terms
Huge
of the
way, yeah.
position. But as you said, so many advantages too, if you really embrace that. You've got this global podcast that reaches, millions and millions of people that you would otherwise not be able to reach. So what is it that you hope attendees leave your keynote inspired to implement?
To embrace the uniqueness of this time, and I'll be touching on what I consider the three previous golden ages of hypnotherapy, and why right now is the new golden age. And what's interesting is that every other golden age in hindsight had a flag bearer. Mesmer was the flag bearer of that kind of first golden age. You could say Braid, introducing science to that kind of second, kind of period. I would say Ericsson is probably the flag bearer of the third golden age. There is no
Mm,
flag bearer of this golden age because we're in it. And I
mm,
would I would want people to leave my talk with the sense of enthusiasm and inspiration and gratitude of how lucky we are to be hypnotherapists at this particular time in history because
mm.
there's so many opportunities that weren't granted to very talented hypnotherapists of the past.
Yeah, great. Oh, that's amazing, Adam. I'm so glad that you came and chatted with us today to be able to open people's mind up to, what it is further that you're going to talk about at conference, but just in general to be able to open up the possibilities of, what does that next decade involve for us as hypnotherapists, as coaches, and what are the possibilities? So thanks again for chatting with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Tara.